So now we have made an anchor or a link out of our two list items. And now we need to start styling those buttons, those hyperlinks. So I'm going to get our code. So let's talk about this. We have main nav buttons UL. So what we've added is now we're going to include the list item, and then next A, as you can well see, there's the anchor tag after the list item. Technically, this as a whole is called a pseudo class. We're using these classes to eventually get down to this pseudo, and the pseudo is the colon link part. And basically the pseudo, what this means is it has default function. It does something on its own. It's part of the HTML, CSS standard, more so the HTML. A hyperlink is going to be purple with an underline until you click on it, and then it's blue with an underline. So we're gonna hijack the default function, and we're going to make the link look the way we want. First part, main nav buttons UL li a colon link targets the hyperlink. Then we have a comma, and then what we're going to do is we're going to target the next pseudo and its function. So now we have main nav buttons UL li a colon visited. So that is the visited state. So when we click on the button is going to continue to look like the hyperlink and not take on the default characteristics of the visited state. And then we can take a look at our rules here. So we're dealing with position. I'm going to set the position to relative. So it's going to be positioned relative to the nav. I'm going to set the width, the nav element. So the width is going to be 100 pixels. The height will be 40. The line height, this is a little trick here. So if I set the line height and the height to match, then the font, the type inside, will vertically align top to bottom. We're going to set some margin, 0 on the top, 20 pixels on the right, and then 0 on the bottom, 0 on the left. We're going to zero out the padding. I'm going to use the default Verdana with a sans serif backup. The font size will be 14 pixels. Let's just modify this. So 14 pixels, we could probably say 0.8 rem. The font weight will be 700. Our color is going to be white, and it's going to be 80% opaque because this is RGB alpha. The text decoration, we're going to hijack the text decoration and make it go away. We're going to set the text align to center. So now we have center type inside of an element that is 100 pixels wide. Because we're matching our line height and our height, our text is going to be centered. The text will be centered top to bottom also, or vertically. Background color is going to be this color here. I'm going to set the display to block. So what we're going to do is we're going to force the element. We're going to force that hyperlink that is an inline element. Instead of just capturing the space that is the text, we're going to display the entire block of the element. So we're going to force the entire 100 pixel width and the 40 pixel height to display itself, and not just right around the text itself, just the words itself. We're going to do a little trick here. It's called floating. We're going to float our element to the left. So that's how our two buttons are going to get on the left hand side. So we're floating them to the left, and then we have to do something called a clear, but we're doing float left, clear none, so they'll go next to each other. One will float, then the next one will float to the left. We're going to set a border of 1 pixel. The border will be solid, and then we're going to make the border white, and the border radius will be 20 pixels. So the height is 40. If we set the border radius to half the height, we should end up with nice rounded corners. And then transition all. This is a little animation. So a transition, and you can look this up. So what we're going to do with this transition is we're going to tell all the properties, which means all of these properties up here, if we were to change any of them, at one point, then they would all have a transition. Think of a transition of going from one color to another color, one opacity to another opacity, one size to another size. Anyway, so we're going to create this transition of all the properties which we could potentially change. We're going to have this transition happen in 0.6 seconds. And we deal here, so it's like 0.6 milliseconds. This is going to be what is called an ease in, ease out. So we can do linear. Think of how a car accelerates. When a car accelerates from a dead stop to a top speed, and it does so over a period of time. It doesn't instantaneously get to the top speed. Same would be true of braking. That's the concept here. We're going to start from dead stop. We're going to accelerate to what is our speed, and then we're going to decelerate. If we did a linear, it would be a bit more of a flash. This is going to have kind of a pulse to it, but it's going to be subtle. So we've just taken care of the two states for the pseudo link, the pseudo visited. There's two more states that we need to deal with. And now what we're looking at is we have, again, our pseudo class, main nav, buttons, ul, li, a, colon, hover. This is the state when we actually have the cursor over the button. And then a comma, and we have our next pseudo class. And in this case, main nav, buttons, ul, li, a colon, active. Active is when you are actively clicking on the link. So you have four states. You have the link itself. You have the link after it's been visited. You have the link when you're hovering over it, and you have the link while you're actually clicking on it. So in programming, they would call these events that happen. So all we're going to do when we're hovering, or even when we're in the active click state, is we're going to change the background color. And then, of course, I added a comment just to let us know that our main fixed navigation ends. Let's go to our preview, and what we should do is a refresh, and we should see our two buttons as we styled them. You will see we have these nice round corners, and then when I place the cursor, we'll see that we now go from this light gray background to sort of a lime green background. We've created our navigation, formatted elements in our navigation, created a previous and a next button, and then we also used pseudo classes to style the two buttons. And then we've set our navigation to a width of 100%. So you'll see this will in fact stretch to be 100%. Being a little slow because I'm doing this on a video, but at a certain point, remember we set the width to have a max width of 950. We didn't test that at the time, but there it is. We have reached 950. So the window will get more narrow. But you'll notice that the buttons stopped moving over to the left. So the navigation will only get to 950 pixels because we use that minimum width at the beginning. So we have finished our navigation. And I should note that when we scroll, you'll see that your content goes behind and the navigation does indeed stay fixed.